The royal funeral fire was supposed to die when Sera Vale touched it. Instead, it crowned her. Before that impossible moment, she was only the ash-marked girl from the lower shrine, the one servants avoided crossing in narrow corridors, the one nobles blamed when candles guttered black or dragonglass cracked without warning. A pale crescent of ash had marked the skin beneath her left collarbone since birth, dark as smoke, shaped like a broken wing. The priests called it a death sign. The court called it contamination. Sera had learned to keep her collar high and her eyes low, because in Dravenhold, a girl born with ash on her skin was always one accusation away from a pyre. When Sera was 8, a chapel candle died black as she passed. The priestesses made her kneel in ash until dawn and told her some girls were born close enough to death to be useful. Tonight, the accusation had finally found her. The funeral terrace stood open beneath a storm-dark sky, built from black stone above the eastern cliffs where dragons circled only on coronation days and death nights. At its center, the royal pyre burned blue-white around the body of Queen Evelyn, Dragon King Kael Draven's dead bride. Her face lay hidden beneath a veil of silver gauze. Her hands were folded over a crown of pale dragon bone. Around the terrace, nobles in mourning black watched with dry eyes and hungry silence. They had not come to grieve. They had come to see who the fire blamed. Sera stood at the foot of the pyre with an iron basin in both hands. Rainwater filled it to the rim, gathered from the chapel roof before dawn, blessed by 3 priestesses, and made cold enough to sting through the metal. Her wrists trembled, but she did not drop it. High Priestess Morwen Vale stood beside the pyre in white funeral robes, her silver hair braided with black pearls. Her expression was sorrowful enough for the court, but Sera had seen her smile once when she thought no servant was looking. The moonstone staff in Morwen's hand carried a smear of black ash near its silver tip, the same color darkening Queen Evelyn's lips. The queen died with ash on her lips, Morwen said, her voice carrying over the wind. And this girl was found near the death chamber, before the last bell. A murmur moved through the court. Sera lifted her eyes. I was sent to clean the lamps. Her voice sounded small against the fire, but it did not break. Morwen turned to her gently. And yet the lamps burned black after you left, because someone had poured grave oil into them, Sera wanted to say. Because the queen was already cold when I entered. Because the fire in that room bent away from her body as if it did not recognize her. But no one in Dravenhold believed ash-marked girls over priestesses. No one, except, perhaps, the man standing beyond the pyre. Dragon King Kael Draven had not sat during the rite. He stood beneath a torn black banner, tall and broad-shouldered in dark armor, his face carved from grief and command. His black hair was wind-tossed, his jaw severe, his golden eyes fixed not on the dead queen, but on the flames around her. Sera had never seen him this close. The whole kingdom feared him. They said his dragon had burned 3 rival armies and slept beneath his skin like a second king. They said he had loved Queen Evelyn because she was beautiful, noble, and chosen by the priests. They said her death had turned him colder than winter iron. But Sera saw something else. The funeral fire did not warm him. It recoiled from him. Every time the blue-white flames leaned toward his armor, they twisted away again, as if refusing to touch the bond between king and queen. Kael noticed it too. She saw the muscle tighten in his jaw. She saw the grief in him sharpen into suspicion. Morwen saw it and moved quickly. Let the cursed girl extinguish the flame, she declared. If the queen died by natural fate, the funeral fire will sleep. If the girl's ash mark poisoned the royal breath, the fire will turn black and name her guilty. Sera's hands tightened around the basin. This was not a cleansing. It was a verdict dressed as ritual. 2 guards shoved her forward. Heat rolled over her skin. The mark beneath her collarbone began to burn, not with pain, but with recognition. She nearly stumbled. Kael's gaze cut to her. For one breath, the terrace seemed to narrow, until only the king, the fire, and the ash beneath her skin existed. "Wait," he said. The court froze. Morwen's face did not change, but her fingers tightened around the moonstone staff. "Your Majesty?" Kael looked at Sera, as if he had heard something no one else could. "Why is your mark glowing?" Every noble turned. Sera looked down. A faint ember-red light bled through the thin gray fabric covering her collarbone. Panic rose inside her. "I do not know," she whispered. Morwen stepped between them. "Ash marks react to death. Fire. That is why she must be judged before the queen's spirit is offended further." Kael's golden eyes narrowed. "The queen's spirit has not answered this fire once." The words struck the terrace like thunder. Morwen's smile vanished for half a breath. Then the dead queen's veil moved. Not from wind, from underneath. A woman near the front screamed. The pyre flared higher, blue turning gold at the edges. Sera heard something inside it. A low, broken sound, like a dragon trying to breathe through chains. Kael took a step toward the flames. Morwen raised her staff. "Extinguish it." The guards forced Sera forward again. She stood so close to the pyre that heat licked tears from her eyes before they could fall. The basin shook in her hands. Every instinct told her to run. But behind the fire, through the wavering heat, she saw Queen Evelyn's covered face tilt slightly toward her, not accusing. Warning. Sera lifted the basin. Kael's voice cut through the storm. "If the fire harms her, I will burn every priest on this terrace." Morwen went still. Sera poured. Rainwater fell onto the funeral fire. The flames should have died. They rose. Gold erupted through blue-white death flame, spiraling upward until the whole terrace blazed brighter than dawn. The nobles cried out and shielded their faces. The guards staggered away from Sera. The basin slipped from her hands and struck the stone with a hollow ring. Above the pyre, the flames shaped themselves into a crown. Not Kael's crown, not the dragon-bone crown resting on the dead queen's chest. A woman's crown, ancient and fierce, made of ember and black gold. It hovered above Sera's head. The ash mark beneath her collarbone burned through the fabric, shining like a living wound. Then, the funeral fire opened. Inside it, a vision appeared. Sera standing beside Dragon King Kael in a chamber of red banners, his hand pressed to her heart. His dragon, shadow curled protectively around them both. On the floor behind them lay Queen Evelyn's crown, cracked in two. The court fell silent. Kael stared at the vision, as if it had cut him open. Morwen stepped back. Only one step. But Sera saw the fear beneath her veil of holiness. Then Queen Evelyn's corpse sat upright inside the fire. For the first time since the funeral began, Kael looked less like a grieving king and more like a man realizing the woman he buried had been used to accuse the woman his fire recognized. The silver gauze burned away from Evelyn's face. Her lips were black with ash, and in a voice that was not dead enough, she whispered, "She was the one you were meant to burn for." And the dragon beneath Kael's skin answered her with a roar that sounded like grief remembering its true name. The dragon's roar did not come from the sky. It came from inside Kael Draven. The sound tore through the funeral terrace so violently that the blue-white flames bent away from the pyre. Nobles stumbled backward, and every dragon carved into the black stone walls seemed to open its mouth in answer. Sera stood frozen before the burning corpse of Queen Evelyn, rainwater still dripping from her fingers, the ancient crown of ember and black gold hovering above her head like a verdict no one knew how to survive. Kael staggered once, not from weakness, from recognition. His shadow stretched across the terrace behind him, and for one breath it was not shaped like a man. It was a dragon with its wings half torn open, its head thrown back, its jaws bound in chains of funeral smoke. Sera saw it. So did Morwen. The high priestess lifted her moonstone staff. "Seal the pyre." 4 white-robed priestesses rushed forward with bowls of grave salt. They threw the salt into the flames, chanting under their breath. The fire should have dimmed. Instead, it turned gold. Queen Evelyn's burned lips opened again. "Not me," she whispered. The terrace fell silent. Kael's face had gone pale beneath the firelight. "Evelyn," the dead queen's head turned toward him slowly. Her eyes remained closed beneath the ash. "Not wife, not mate, not chosen by flame." Morwen's voice cracked through the shock. "This is corpse sorcery. The ash-marked girl has twisted the funeral rite." Sera stepped back, but the golden flame followed her, curling around her wrists without burning. The mark beneath her collarbone throbbed like a second heart. She wanted to deny it, to make herself small enough for the accusation to pass over her, but the whole court was staring now. The same nobles who had treated her like a death stain were looking at her as if she had become the most dangerous thing on the terrace. Kael turned on Morwen. "You told me the death. Fire accepted her. It did. Then why does it refuse her now?" Morwen's mouth tightened. "Because someone has corrupted the rite." Sera looked at the moonstone staff in Morwen's hand. The smear of black ash near its silver tip had begun to smoke. Kael saw her looking. Morwen did too. For a heartbeat, fear crossed the priestess's face, thin and bright. Then she struck Sera across the mouth with the staff. Pain burst hot through Sera's face. She fell to one knee. The court gasped, not because they pitied her, but because the golden funeral fire screamed. Kael moved. Morwen raised the staff toward him. "Your Majesty, do not touch her. If the ash mark has awakened, skin contact could bind the curse to your dragon." Kael stopped inches away. That hesitation hurt more than the blow. Sera looked up at him with blood on her lip, and gold fire reflected in her eyes. She understood why he stopped. He was king. He had a corpse, speaking from his wife's pyre, a court trembling around him, and a girl accused of cursing his queen kneeling at his feet. One wrong move could turn grief into rebellion, but understanding did not make it painless. Kael saw that too. His jaw hardened. "Stand," he said to her, not gently, but not cruelly. Sera rose on shaking legs. Morwen pointed the smoking staff at her. "Ask her why she was outside the queen's chamber the night Evelyn died." Sera wiped blood from her mouth. "I told you. I was sent to clean the lamps." "By whom?" The question cut the terrace quiet. Sera froze. She had never known. The order had come through a folded black token left in the lower shrine, marked with the death rite seal. She had obeyed because shrine girls did not question royal commands. Kael noticed her silence. "Who gave the order?" Sera looked at Morwen. The priestess smiled slightly. Sera's stomach turned cold. Morwen had not merely accused her after the queen died. She had placed her near the death chamber before it happened. "I was sent with a death rite token," Sera said. "Where is it?" Kael asked. Morwen answered first. "Conveniently lost, I imagine." Sera's hands curled. She remembered hiding it because the seal had felt wrong. Not royal wax, not priestess wax. Something dark pressed into black paper. "My room," she said. Under the loose stone by the hearth, Morwen's eyes sharpened. Kael looked to his captain. "Search it." "No," Morwen said too quickly. Everyone heard it. The golden flames rose higher. Queen Evelyn's corpse smiled with burned lips. Kael turned back to the pyre. "What did she do to you?" The dead queen did not answer him. She looked at Sera. "Widowfire knows the bride," she whispered. "But I was never bride." Then the vision inside the pyre shifted. This time it showed a moonlit chamber. Queen Evelyn stood alive before a mirror, beautiful and cold, while Morwen painted black ash across her lips with the tip of the moonstone staff. Evelyn did not look afraid. She looked angry. "You promised me a crown," Evelyn said. Morwen's younger face remained calm. "And you wore one. He never loved me. He was never meant to." Sera's breath caught. In the vision, Evelyn turned toward a hidden door. Behind it, Unseen by both women, a younger Sera stood holding a basket of lamp oil, frozen in terror, as the ash mark beneath her collarbone glowed through her servant dress. Morwen saw the glow in the mirror, and smiled. The vision vanished. The court erupted. Kael stood motionless, but the dragon shadow behind him strained against its smoke chains. Morwen's voice rose above the panic. "She is making the dead lie." Sera looked at her. "No, you are afraid the dead finally remember." The words surprised even Sera. Kael looked at her, and something dangerous shifted between them. Not trust, not desire, not yet, but the first fracture in the wall of suspicion he had placed around her. Then the captain returned through the rain, carrying a black token wrapped in cloth. Morwen went still. Kael took it. The wax seal on the token bore the mark of the royal death rites, but when he held it near the pyre, the wax melted. Beneath the priestess seal was another mark, a dragon with its mouth sewn shut. Kael's dragon shadow roared again. This time, the smoke chains around its jaws cracked. Morwen stepped back. Sera felt the golden fire tighten around her wrists, not like chains, but like hands guiding her toward the pyre. Queen Evelyn's corpse lifted one burned hand and pointed at the high priestess. She buried his bond before it could breathe, the dead queen whispered. Kael's eyes turned from gold to molten fire. Morwen raised her staff and struck the stone. The funeral terrace split open beneath Sera's feet. She fell into darkness, and Kael jumped after her. Kael caught Sera before the darkness swallowed her. His arm locked around her waist as the funeral terrace vanished above them, black stone splitting into a jagged mouth of smoke and gold flame. For one breath they fell together, through heat, ash, and broken ritual fire, his armor burning against her side, her hands gripping his shoulder because there was nothing else between them and the abyss. Then wings opened behind him. Not real wings, shadow wings. The dragon beneath Kael's skin tore through the smoke like a beast trapped too long inside a man's bones. Its form was still half-bound, its jaws marked by cracked chains, but it slowed their fall enough for them to crash onto a ledge of black glass rather than into the furnace pit below. Sera hit the ground hard. Kael twisted beneath her and took most of the impact. For one stunned moment, she lay across his chest, hearing the violent beat of his heart beneath scorched armor. He did not push her away. His hand stayed at her back, protective by instinct before pride could correct him. Above them, the funeral fire roared through the broken terrace. Below them stretched a buried chamber Sera had never seen, though she had cleaned every shrine corridor in Dravenhold since childhood. It was vast and circular, carved from volcanic stone, with walls marked by old dragon bond runes. Chains hung from the ceiling like dead vines. At the center stood a sealed altar, made of black bone and amber glass. On the altar lay dozens of crowns. Not royal crowns, marriage crowns. Each one was cracked. Sera slowly stood. The mark beneath her collarbone burned brighter. Kael rose beside her, one hand pressed to the fresh cut along his ribs. This place is beneath the death terrace. Sera stared at the crowns. What is it? His face hardened. A bond crypt. The words meant little to her, but the way he said them made the chamber colder. Kael stepped toward the altar. The dragon shadow behind him recoiled. He saw the crowns and went still. Some were ancient, some nearly dust. One looked newly broken, pale dragon bones scorched black at the edges. Queen Evelyn's crown. Sera's breath caught. Kael touched it with 2 fingers. The altar answered. Amber light rose from the cracked crowns, forming ghostly figures of women in funeral veils. Not one, not 2, many, all standing beside dragon kings whose faces had been scratched away in memory. Every woman wore black ash across her lips. Sera whispered, "They were all false brides." Kael looked at her sharply. She did not know how she knew, but the words had come from the burn beneath her collarbone. The amber vision shifted. High priestesses across generations stood before the altar, sealing dragon mate bonds before they could awaken. They placed noble brides beside kings, crowned them publicly, and buried the true bond under death rites, ash marks, and obedient lies. Kael's face lost color. "My line," he said quietly. Sera understood the horror at the same time he did. This had not begun with Evelyn. Morwen had inherited a system. The throne had been fed false queens for generations. A sound echoed from the far wall. A low breath. Sera turned. Beyond the altar, behind a lattice of black chains, lay something enormous in the dark. At first, she thought it was stone. Then a golden eye opened. A dragon. Not Kael's shadow. Not an illusion. A living dragon, ancient and wounded, chained beneath the death terrace. Its scales were blackened gold. Its wings were pinned with moonstone hooks. Around its jaws were the same smoke chains Sera had seen on Kael's shadow. Kael stepped forward as if pulled by pain. No, the dragon's eye fixed on him, then on Sera. The chamber filled with a voice older than the palace. Ember Widow. Sera staggered. Kael caught her elbow, then released her before the touch could become command. "What did it call you?" She pressed a hand to the burning mark. "I do not know." The dragon exhaled smoke. Widow fire reveals the bride they buried. The altar flared. A memory rose between them. Baby Sera in the arms of a woman with soot-black hair and the same ash mark beneath her collarbone. Priestesses surrounded them. Morwen, younger and colder, held a blade over the infant's chest. The woman pleaded. "She is only a child." Morwen answered, "No, she is a witness waiting to grow teeth." The blade touched the baby's skin. The ash mark appeared. Sera stumbled back, shaking. "They gave it to me." Kael's eyes burned gold. "Your mark is not a curse." The chained dragon lifted its head. "It is a seal." Above them, Morwen's voice echoed through the broken terrace. "Your Majesty, step away from the girl. She was bred to unmake your crown." Kael looked up toward the crack in the ceiling, then at Sera. For one breath, the old suspicion returned. Not because he wanted it, but because every king was trained to fear anything that could unmake him. Sera saw it, and hated that it still hurt. She stepped away from him. "Then go back." His jaw tightened. "Sera." "No." Her voice shook, but she held it. "You either believe what your fire showed you, or you go back to the woman who put black ash on your queen's lips." The chamber went silent. Kael stared at her. No servant girl in Dravenhold spoke to kings like that. No accused girl survived it. But Kael only lowered his gaze to the cracked marriage crowns, the chained dragon, and the ash mark burning through her dress. When he looked back at her, the suspicion had not vanished, but it had lost. "I believe the fire," he said. The chained dragon closed its golden eye, as if in relief. Then the altar split open. Inside lay a red thread of living flame, stretched between a cracked queen's crown and Sera's glowing mark. Kael reached toward it. The thread snapped away from him and wrapped around Sera's wrist. Above, Morwen began chanting. The chamber chains woke. One by one, they lifted from the walls and turned toward Sera like serpents. Kael drew his sword. But the oldest chain struck first, not at him, at her heart. The chain struck for Sera's heart. Kael moved before thought could catch him. His sword met the chain in a burst of black sparks, the impact driving him to one knee. The ancient metal screamed against the blade, alive with Morwen's chant from above. It was not ordinary iron. It was death bond chain, forged to hold dragon mate fire in place and bury whatever truth burned too brightly. Sera staggered back, clutching the red flame thread around her wrist. The thread pulsed once. Kael flinched. She felt it in him. Not through skin, not through magic, she understood. Through the thread. A sudden, violent echo of pain across the space between them, as if the flame had tied her breath to his and made his wound answer in her chest. His golden eyes snapped to her. "Did it hurt you?" Sera almost laughed. A chain had nearly pierced her heart. An ancient dragon had called her by a name she did not understand, and the Dragon King was looking at her as if her pain had become the most dangerous thing in the room. "Yes," she said, "but not from the chain." The red thread tightened between them. Kael looked down. One end wrapped around Sera's wrist. The other had burned itself into the old scar beneath his armor, just above his heart. The chained dragon opened its eye again. "Buried bond." Morwen's voice sharpened from the broken terrace above. "Do not let her speak to it. Kill the ash-marked girl before she wakes what the crown buried." The chains attacked together. Kael rose with a snarl and cut through the first two, but more came from the walls, lifting like black serpents. One wrapped around his sword arm. Another snapped toward Sera's throat. She ducked, stumbled, and fell against the altar of broken marriage crowns. The red thread flared. The cracked crowns began to tremble. Not all of them, only Evelyn's. Its pale dragonbone rim split wider, and from inside it spilled a thin stream of black ash. The ash crawled across the altar toward Morwen's moonstone staff, lying in the memory light, shaping itself into letters Sera somehow understood. False widow. Sera's breath caught. The Ember widow inheritance was not a power of death. It was a power of proof. It did not crown widows. It named false ones. Above, Morwen's chant faltered for the first time. Kael heard it. "So she staged the queen's death," he said. The words were low, but the chamber seemed to recoil from them. Sera looked at the chained dragon. "Why?" The dragon's answer moved through the walls. "Because true dragon fire chooses once." The altar flared again. A new vision rose, sharper than the last. Morwen stood in the queen's chamber on the night Evelyn died. Evelyn was alive, seated before the mirror, black ash painted on her lips. She looked frightened now, no longer cold. "You said I would survive the rite," Evelyn whispered. Morwen tightened a silver cord around her wrist. "You wanted a crown without a bond. This is the price of borrowing fire. I did what you asked. You did what the throne required." Then Evelyn looked toward the door. Sera stood there in the vision, younger by only a few days, carrying lamp oil, frozen as her ash mark glowed. Evelyn saw it. Her expression changed from fear to recognition. "She is the one," Evelyn breathed. Morwen turned. The vision shattered before the priestess struck. Sera pressed a hand over her mouth. Queen Evelyn had known. Maybe not everything. Maybe not enough to save herself. But in her final moments, she had understood that Sera was not the curse. She was the evidence. Kael stood very still, chains tightening around his sword arm until blood seeped beneath his gauntlet. Morwen killed her. The red thread burned brighter. His dragon shadow rose behind him, larger now, smoke chains cracking along its jaws. Rage moved through him like fire through dry wood. But Sera saw the danger. If he let the rage lead, Morwen would use it. She had built this chamber to make kings burn the wrong thing. "Kael," Sera said. He looked at her. His name on her lips changed the air. "Not your majesty. Not king. Kael." The chains paused for half a breath. Sera did not know what she was doing. She only knew that the altar, the dragon, the dead queen's crown, and the flame around her wrist all wanted the same truth. She picked up Evelyn's cracked crown. It was heavier than she expected. Cold at first, then burning. The black ash inside it climbed over her fingers. Kael stepped forward. "Do not." Sera met his eyes. "If I let go, she wins. If you hold it wrong, it may kill you. Everything here was made to kill me." That silenced him. She lifted the cracked queen's crown toward the chained dragon. "Show him," she whispered. The chamber answered. The crown broke apart in her hands, not into pieces, into flame. Gold fire surged upward and wrapped around Kael's dragon shadow. The smoke chains on its jaws snapped one by one. Kael gasped, staggering as if something inside him had been torn open. His dragon shadow finally roared without restraint, and the sound shook dust from the ceiling. But the chained living dragon did not rise. Its eye turned toward Sera. Not enough. The red thread around her wrist pulled sharply toward the dragon's heart, where a black hook had been buried beneath the scales. Sera understood. Morwen had not only buried Kael's bond, she had anchored it inside the ancient dragon. To free one, they had to free both. From above, stone cracked. Morwen was coming down. Kael ripped the chain from his sword arm and stood between Sera and the stare of falling ash. "Tell me what you need." Sera looked at the black hook in the dragon's heart, then at the fire thread binding her to Kael. Her voice trembled, but it did not break. "Your trust." Kael's expression changed. For a king, trust was not a feeling. It was a weapon surrendered. For a dragon, it was worse. It was a throat offered to flame. He held out his wounded hand. Sera placed hers in it. The red thread turned white gold, and the ancient dragon began to breathe. The ancient dragon inhaled. The whole bond crypt answered. Ash lifted from the floor in spirals. Broken marriage crowns trembled on the altar. The black chains hanging from the walls pulled tight, as if the chamber itself had realized, too late, that the thing it had buried was beginning to wake. Sera stood with her hand in Kael's, the white gold thread burning between their palms, and felt his trust move through her like fire crossing a bridge. It was terrifying. Not because it hurt, because it did not. For the first time in her life, flame touched the ash mark beneath her collarbone and did not treat her like a curse. It moved through her as if it had always known the way. Kael's fingers tightened around hers. "Sera." His voice was rough, almost warning. She looked at him. His golden eyes had changed. The cold command was still there, but beneath it, something ancient and wounded had opened. His dragon shadow towered behind him, jaws free now, wings spreading against the walls. It was still not whole. Smoke chains dragged from its throat to the black hook buried in the living dragon's heart. Sera understood the choice before anyone said it. If she pulled the hook free, Kael's dragon might be restored. Or the old wound might tear both dragons apart. Morwen's footsteps sounded above. Slow. Certain. The high priestess descended through the broken stair in white funeral robes, darkened by ash. Moonstone staff in hand, her silver hair loosened from its braids. She no longer looked sorrowful. She looked furious in the calm, sacred way of someone who had mistaken control for holiness for too many years. Behind her came 3 priestesses carrying black veils, funeral veils. Sera knew then they had not come to stop the ritual. They had come to bury it. Morwen's gaze fell on their joined hands. "So it has begun." Kael raised his sword. Morwen did not look at him. "You still think this is romance, Your Majesty? This is older than desire, older than grief. True dragonfire chooses once, yes, and when it chooses wrong, kingdoms burn." Sera felt Kael go still. Morwen smiled faintly. "Did you think your ancestors buried true bonds out of cruelty? No. They buried them because dragons bonded to inconvenient women destroy dynasties. Servant girls, shrine girls, foreign blood, ash-marked witnesses. The crown survives when fire is taught obedience." "You killed Evelyn," Kael said. "I gave Evelyn what she wanted." Morwen's voice hardened. "A crown, a place in history, a death grand enough to keep the court loyal. Do not pretend she was innocent. She knew she was not your mate. She knew the funeral fire would never truly claim her." The cracked crowns on the altar hissed. Sera looked at Evelyn's broken crown, now nothing but gold flame between her fingers and memory. The dead queen had not been blameless, but she had still been used, still killed, still turned into a weapon aimed at another woman. Morwen lifted her staff toward Sera. "And you, little Ashmark, You should have died in the lower shrine before your mark ripened. Kael stepped in front of Sera. She pulled him back. The movement startled him. Morwen's eyes sharpened. How sweet. She thinks she can stand between kings and rites. Sera released Kael's hand. The white gold thread did not break. It stretched between them, pulsing from her wrist to his heart, from his shadow dragon to the chained ancient beast. She stepped toward Morwen, fear moving with her, not gone, not conquered, but no longer in command. You marked me when I was a child, Sera said. Morwen's face remained still. The altar answered for her. Gold fire rose again, showing Sera at 8 years old, kneeling in ash until dawn while priestesses stood around her. Morwen's younger hand pressed 2 fingers to the child's collarbone, darkening the broken wing mark. Sera remembered the cold floor, the dead candle, the shame of being told she was useful only because death recognized her. The vision faded. Sera's voice came quieter. You did not fear what I was. Morwen's expression changed by a fraction. You feared what I could prove. The ancient dragon exhaled. White gold fire rolled across the floor and struck Morwen's staff. The smear of black ash near its silver tip ignited. Morwen gasped and tried to pull it back, but the fire climbed the staff like a living accusation. Images burst from it, Morwen painting ash onto Evelyn's lips, Morwen placing the death rite token in the lower shrine, Morwen ordering Sera sent to the chamber, Morwen sealing the old bond crypt after each false queen died. The 3 priestesses behind her faltered. Kael stared at the visions, grief hardening into something colder than rage. Every queen? He asked. Morwen's jaw tightened. The staff burned brighter. The answer appeared in flame. Not every queen, only the ones who stood in the way. Sera looked at Kael. He understood. Some women had been chosen by politics, some by blood, some by fear. But when true fire awakened elsewhere, the priestesses buried it, redirected it, or turned the chosen woman into a curse. Sera was not the first. She was the first who survived long enough for the funeral fire to speak. Morwen snapped the burning staff against the floor. The bond crypt erupted. Black veils flew from the priestess's hands and spread through the air like wings. One wrapped around Kael's dragon shadow, tightening over its newly freed jaws. Another flew toward the ancient dragon's eyes. The third came for Sera's face. Kael cut one apart. The ancient dragon burned the second. Sera caught the third with both hands. The veil was cold as grave water. The moment it touched her skin, whispers filled her head. False bride, ash curse, death-marked girl. No one will believe you. No king will choose ruin for you. Her knees weakened. The white gold thread flickered. Morwen saw it. There. That is the truth beneath all this fire. She is still the girl kneeling in ash. Sera nearly let go. Then Kael's hand closed over hers from behind. Not to take the veil, to hold her steady. She is the girl who stood up, he said. The words entered the thread. White gold fire surged from their joined hands and turned the black veil to ash. Morwen stepped back. The hook in the ancient dragon's heart cracked. Sera turned toward it. The dragon lowered its enormous head until its golden eye filled her vision. Ember Widow, it whispered through the chamber. Reveal. Do not revenge. Sera understood. She placed one hand over the hook, the other still held by Kael. Then she looked at Morwen. Let the dead choose what burns. She pulled. The black hook came free. For one heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, every false funeral fire in Dravenhold woke beneath the palace. Every false funeral fire in Dravenhold woke at once. Beneath the palace, sealed chambers began to burn, not with flames meant to consume wood or flesh, but with old death rite fire that had been sleeping inside stone walls, buried crowns, ash jars, and forgotten altars. The bond crypt shook as hundreds of hidden flames opened their eyes. Above, through layers of black rock and royal floors. The funeral terrace screamed with wind. Below, the ancient dragon lifted its chained head fully for the first time in generations. Sera still held the black hook. It had come free from the dragon's heart, but it had not died. It pulsed in her palm, slick with dark ash, trying to burrow into her skin. Kael's hand tightened around hers before she could drop it. "Do not let it choose you," he said. Morwen laughed, though her voice had lost its calm. "It already has. That is what widows are, Your Majesty. Not brides, not queens. Witnesses made to carry what kings cannot bear." The ancient dragon's wound poured white gold fire across the floor. The flame did not touch Sera's dress. It circled her, Kael, and the altar of broken marriage crowns, then spread toward every sealed passage in the crypt. The walls became visions. Sera saw funeral after funeral, queens lying beneath veils, noble brides smiling while their eyes begged for help, servant girls dragged out of chambers before dawn, true bonds waking in the wrong women, the unwanted women, the women whose blood did not please the council. Each time, a high priestess painted black ash on a mouth, declared the bond corrupted, and fed the real fire into the crypt below. Kael watched with his face turned to stone. One vision showed his great-grandmother, a stable-born girl with flame in her hands, kneeling before a funeral pyre while the court called her poison. Another showed a northern healer pressed against a king's chest while his dragon shadow bowed to her, only for priestesses to drag her away before dawn. Another showed Evelyn herself, signing a marriage vow while Morwen stood behind her, smiling. None of the women in the visions wore crowns for long. All of their fires had ended here. Sera's throat tightened until she could barely breathe. "How many?" The ancient dragon answered in a voice like mountains burning. "Enough to build a dynasty on graves." Kael turned toward Morwen. For the first time, his grief no longer looked confused. It had found its target. "You called this protection?" Morwen lifted her chin. "It was survival. Dragons are not gentle creatures. True bonds make kings irrational. A king tied to the wrong woman will burn armies for her, break treaties for her, empty treasuries, spare traitors, ruin bloodlines. The priesthood gave Dravenhold stability. You gave it corpses. I gave it order." Sera looked at the black hook in her palm, then at the false funeral fires burning through the walls. "No, you gave it silence." The hook convulsed. Pain shot up her arm. Kael reached for it, but Sera pulled back. Not because she did not want his help, because she finally understood what the hook was. It was not merely Morwen's weapon. It was the nail used to pin every buried bond to the ancient dragon's heart. If Kael touched it with rage, it would turn his fire into judgment. If Sera held it with hatred, it would turn her proof into revenge. That was why the ancient dragon had warned her. "Reveal. Do not revenge." Sera closed her hand around the hook. The pain nearly brought her to her knees. Kael moved instantly, but she shook her head. "I need the pyre," she said. Morwen's eyes widened. Kael understood more slowly. "The queen's funeral fire." Sera nodded. "All of them. The old false fires were awake now, but hidden. If they stayed below the palace, Morwen could still claim the visions were ashcraft, secret, corrupted. The court had to see. Every noble who had stood beneath the storm, every priestess who had blessed the lie, every soldier who had held Sera in place before the pyre, they had to witness what death-rite fire had been used to hide. Morwen stepped toward the stair. "She will not leave this crypt." The three priestesses raised their hands, but they were slower now. Fear had entered them. Sera saw it in their faces. They had followed Morwen because belief was easier than guilt. Now the walls had shown too much. One priestess lowered her hand first, then another. Morwen turned on them. "Cowards." Kael lifted his sword. "No. Witnesses." The word struck the chamber. The ancient dragon exhaled. White gold fire lifted Sera from the ground. Not high. Only enough for the false funeral flames to gather under her feet like a path. Kael stepped onto it beside her without hesitation. The red-white bond thread between them brightened. No longer fragile, no longer buried. His dragon shadow rose behind him, jaws free, wings half unfurled, still wounded but no longer chained to silence. Morwen raised her staff again. Sera looked at the smear of black ash near its silver tip. The hook in her hand flared. For one heartbeat, she saw Evelyn's final moment clearly. Not as an enemy, not as a rival. A woman trapped inside a crown she had chosen before she understood it would become her coffin. Evelyn had looked at Sera that night, not with hatred, but with warning. She is the one. Sera lifted the black hook toward Morwen. The false funeral fires around the walls turned toward the priestess. Morwen's staff cracked. A cry escaped her. Not fear alone, pain, memory. The price of every rite, returning through the hand that had performed it. Kael took Sera's free hand. Now, together, they ran up the path of white gold fire. The crypt blurred around them. The altar, the crowns, the ancient dragon, Morwen's scream, all fell behind as the flame carried them upward through the broken terrace floor. They emerged into storm and funeral light. The court was still there. Nobles huddled beneath torn banners. Guards surrounded the pyre but dared not touch it. Queen Evelyn's corpse remained seated in the flames, black lips parted, silver veil gone. Above the pyre, the ember crown still hovered over the place where Sera had stood. When Sera rose from the split stone with Kael beside her, every face turned. Then the false funeral fires followed. They burst from the ground in rings around the terrace, each flame holding a different dead woman's face. Queens, servants, healers, unwanted brides. All of them looked toward the court. Morwen emerged behind them, burned staff in hand, hair loose, white robes scorched black at the hem. Sera stepped before the pyre. The black hook in her hand split open. Inside it burned one final memory. The night Queen Evelyn died. Sera lifted it into the funeral fire, and every dead bride began to speak. The first dead bride spoke in a voice made of smoke. I was chosen because my father owned the northern mines. Her face burned inside a ring of white gold fire near the edge of the terrace, young and solemn beneath a crown that had never fit her. The court stared as her image lifted one pale hand to her throat, where black ash stained the skin like a second necklace. The king's dragon turned from me on our wedding night, she whispered. By dawn, the priestesses said I had brought shame to the throne. By dusk, my funeral fire had corrected the story. A second flame rose. A healer with tired eyes. I saved his life in battle, she said. His dragon bowed to me before the army. They called it battlefield fever. Then they called it witchcraft. Then they called me dead. A third, a servant girl. I carried the true flame in my hands, she said. They cut my palms open and poured my blood beneath the marriage altar. One by one, the false funeral fires spoke. The terrace became a graveyard with voices. Nobles who had stood straight moments ago began to shrink beneath the weight of what they had inherited. Some covered their ears. Some wept. Some looked toward Morwen, as if begging her to make the dead silent again. Sera stood before the pyre with the broken hook in her hand, shaking so badly she could barely keep her fingers closed. She had thought truth would feel like power. Instead, it felt like being forced to hold every buried woman's last breath. Kael stood beside her, sword lowered, face lit by grief and fury. His dragon shadow stretched behind him, larger than before, jaws free but wings still scarred by old smoke. Every time another dead bride spoke, the shadow flinched, as if the wound were his own. Queen Evelyn's corpse remained upright inside the royal pyre. Her blackened lips moved last. I agreed to wear the crown, she said. The court went still. Evelyn's burned face turned toward Kael. I wanted it. I wanted the throne. I wanted to be remembered. Morwen told me your true bond was a sickness. She told me the ash-marked girl would destroy you if she lived long enough to wake. Sera's breath caught. Kael did not look away. Evelyn's voice trembled with something almost human now. I believed her until the night I saw Sera in the chamber doorway. The fire bent toward her. Your dragon answered though you were not there. I knew then. Morwen stepped forward, scorched robes snapping in the wind. Enough. The dead queen turned toward her. You killed me before I could confess. The terrace erupted. Kael moved so fast several guards stumbled back from him. He seized Morwen by the front of her white funeral robes and dragged her toward the pyre. The high priestess did not scream. She only smiled with burned lips of her own, because some people feared death less than they feared losing control. Do it, she whispered. Burn me before them. Prove what true bonds make of kings. Kael's hand tightened. The dragon shadow behind him opened its jaws. Sera felt the white gold thread between them flare with his rage. It rushed toward her like a storm, seeking a door. For a heartbeat she saw what Morwen wanted. Kael burning the priestess alive, the court recoiling, the story changing again. The ash-marked girl corrupted him. The true bond made him monstrous. The priesthood had been right all along. No? Sera said. Kael froze. His eyes were molten gold when he looked at her. Sera stepped closer, though every instinct warned her away from a dragon king in the first heat of betrayal. Not fire. Morwen laughed softly. She understands the game better than you. Sera turned to the dead brides. Let them show what she chose. The false funeral fires bent toward Morwen. The priestess's smile vanished. Flame touched her moonstone staff. Then her sleeves. Then the black pearls in her loosened hair. But it did not burn her flesh. It burned memory out of her. Visions tore open above the terrace. Morwen as a young priestess, watching her own sister dragged away after a dragon prince's shadow bowed to her. Morwen weeping before an older high priestess, being told that love unchosen by politics was plague. Morwen learning the rites. Morwen choosing obedience because it hurt, less than admitting her sister had been murdered by sacred law. Sera's anger faltered. Not forgiveness. Never that. But understanding sharpened the cruelty, instead of softening it. Morwen had known exactly what pain she was passing forward. The final vision showed Morwen standing over baby Sera with the ashmark blade. If she lives, a priestess warned, she may reveal all of us. Morwen answered, then let her live cursed. No one listens to cursed girls. The vision collapsed. The court heard every word. Morwen stood trembling, stripped of holiness, still alive. Kael released her. Bind her? He said. No one moved. Not the guards. Not the priestesses. Not the nobles. Fear had made them slow. Sera stepped forward instead. The broken hook in her hand had cooled to dull black. She dropped it at Morwen's feet. You do not get to die inside a story that makes you look faithful, Sera said. You will live long enough to name every woman you buried. For the first time, Morwen looked afraid. Not of death. Of testimony. The ancient dragon's roar rose from beneath the terrace, no longer chained, no longer muffled. The pyre split down the center, and Queen Evelyn's corpse dissolved into gold ash. Her dragonbone crown fell into the fire and cracked apart. Kael looked at Sera. The ember crown still hovered above her head, but now, every dead bride turned toward it, not in accusation, in offering. Sera stepped back. No. Kael's voice was rough. Sera, no. She looked at the crown of ember and black gold. I will not wear what killed them. The crown trembled. Then, it broke into 1,000 sparks. The sparks did not vanish. They flew into Sera's ash mark. Pain tore through her collarbone. She cried out and fell to her knees as the mark burned open, not as a crescent of ash now, but as a living flame shaped like wings. Kael caught her before she struck the stone. Above them, every dragon in the storm-dark sky roared at once. And from beneath Sera's skin, a second dragon answered. The second dragon answered from inside Sera. It did not roar like Kael's dragon, all war and royal command. It sounded like a flame taking its first breath after being buried under ash for years. The living wing-shaped mark beneath her collarbone opened wider white-gold fire spreading under her skin in delicate lines, not consuming her, not destroying her, but revealing what had been hidden beneath the curse, Morwen carved into her as a child. Kael held her against him as the storm tore around the funeral terrace. "Sera," he said, and for the first time, her name sounded like fear in his mouth. She tried to answer, but the fire stole the breath from her lungs. Above them, dragons circled the cliffs, their dark bodies cutting through lightning and rain. One by one, they lowered their heads toward the terrace. Not to Kael. To her. The court saw it. The priestesses saw it. Morwen, bound between two guards now, saw it too, and the blood left her face. "No," she whispered. "No, that line was dead." Kael looked up sharply. "What line?" Morwen pressed her lips together. Sera's mark burned hotter. The ancient dragon's voice rose from beneath the terrace, no longer muffled by chains. Ember Widow was never a curse. It was the witness flame of the first true dragon brides. The dead bride's sparks circled Sera, then flowed into the mark one by one. Each spark carried a fragment of memory. A healer's hands closing around a wounded king, a servant girl standing before a dragon that bowed to her, a northern woman laughing under falling snow while flame shaped itself into wings behind her, women erased from crowns but not from fire. Sera saw them all. She saw why the priesthood feared them. True dragon brides were not chosen for obedience. They were chosen because dragonfire recognized a soul strong enough to withstand it. Some were noble, some were not. Some loved kings, some challenged them, some would have changed the kingdom if they had not been silenced first. Sera's hands curled into Kael's armor. "I am not Evelyn," she whispered. His eyes met hers. "No," he said. "You are not." The answer steadied her more than a promise would have. Morwen laughed suddenly, brittle and desperate. "Do you understand what she is? She is not a bride. She is a verdict. Every dragon that bows to her will remember the women your throne killed." "Good," Kael said. The word silenced the terrace. He rose with Sera in his arms, then slowly set her on her feet, keeping one hand near her waist until he was sure she could stand. His dragon shadow unfolded behind him, now enormous, jaws free, eyes burning the same gold as the fire beneath Sera's skin. The white gold thread between them pulsed, not a chain, a choice waiting to be made. Sera saw it too, and fear struck her deeper than any accusation had. It would be easy now for the court to turn awe into another prison, to call her true bride, hidden queen, savior, and use softer words to build a cage around her. She had escaped death mark, only to stand beneath a crown made from dead women's sparks. She stepped back from Kael, the thread stretched. Pain crossed his face, but he let her move. That mattered, Morwen noticed. "She will leave you, Your Majesty. True fire always makes women believe they can survive without kings." Sera looked at the high priestess. "No, it teaches kings they cannot own survival." The dead bride's flames flared behind her. A murmur moved through the court, not rebellion, not devotion, but something more fragile. Recognition. Kael turned to the nobles. Rain streaked his face. Blood darkened his armor where chains had cut him in the crypt. He looked less like an untouchable king now, and more like a man standing inside the wreckage of his own inheritance. "Every death rite sealed by Morwen will be reopened," he said. "Every woman named curse, false bride, or corrupted bond will be recorded under her true name. Every priestess who helped bury the bond crypt will speak before the court. Morwen's eyes narrowed. And your marriage? The terrace went very still. Sera felt the thread between them burn brighter. Kael looked at her, not at the court. It will not be used to trap her. That was not the answer the nobles wanted. It was not the answer the dragons expected. It was the answer Sera needed. Then the funeral pyre collapsed inward. Queen Evelyn's ashes rose in a final spiral, shaping themselves into her face once more. Not black-lipped now. Not trapped. Only tired. Finish it. The dead queen whispered. Sera understood. The false death rites had spoken. Morwen had been exposed. Kael's dragon had awakened, but the bond itself remained half-buried, split between the living dragon below, Kael's shadow, and the fire inside Sera's mark. If they did not complete it, the priesthood could not use it again, but neither could it heal. The ancient dragon lifted its voice from below. A true bond cannot be claimed. It must be answered. The white gold thread drew taut between Sera and Kael. Kael held out his hand. Not commanding, asking. The entire court watched. Sera looked at his hand. The same hand that had almost stopped at Morwen's warning. The same hand that had caught her in the fall. The same hand that had held hers when the ancient dragon began to breathe. She was not ready to love him. Not fully. Not cleanly. Too much ash stood between them. But when she looked at him now, she no longer saw only the king whose court had condemned her. She saw a man willing to let truth burn his throne. Before he let it burn her, Sera placed her hand in his. The thread became flame. Not around her throat, not around his crown, around their joined hands. Every dragon in the sky folded its wings and descended toward the terrace. Morwen screamed. Do not let them complete it. One of her loyal priestesses, hidden among the guards, drew a funeral knife and lunged toward Sera's back. Kael saw too late. Sera felt the blade before it struck. Then the second dragon inside her opened its eyes. The blade never reached Sera's back. The second dragon opened its eyes beneath her skin, and the world turned white. Not gold, not fire. White. A color so bright, it seemed to strip every lie from the terrace before it could become a scream. The hidden priestess froze with the funeral knife inches from Sera's spine. Her hand shook. Her face twisted in terror as the blade began to melt backward from the tip, not from heat, but from recognition. The weapon knew it had been raised against the wrong flame. Kael caught the priestess by the wrist and threw her to the stone. His dragon shadow rose behind him, snarling. But Sera's fire moved first. It did not burn the priestess. It wrapped around her throat and pulled a memory from her mouth. The woman gasped as the image burst above the terrace, Morwen placing a knife into her hand only moments earlier, whispering, If the ash mark completes the bond, every grave opens. Kill her before the king chooses ruin. The court saw it. The dragons saw it. Kael saw it. Morwen's last circle of loyalty broke. The remaining priestesses backed away from her, as if she had become plague. 2 guards lowered their weapons. A noblewoman crossed herself with shaking fingers. The dead bride's flames bent toward Morwen, and this time no sacred robe, no death rite, no old fear stood between her and what she had done. Sera turned slowly. The second dragon was not outside her. It did not rise as a shadow behind her like Kael's. It lived beneath her mark, moving through the white gold lines under her skin like a creature waking inside glass. Its presence was vast but young, ancient but newly breathed. It was not trying to possess her. It was trying to remember her. Kael stepped closer, then stopped. He had learned. He did not reach for her without asking. Sera, he said, voice rough. Are you hurt? The question nearly broke her more than the knife had. For most of her life, people had only asked what she had cursed, what she had ruined, what darkness she carried. No one asked if the ash-marked girl was hurt. Hurt was assumed to be the natural weather around her. She looked down at her hands. The white gold bond flame still wrapped around her fingers and Kael's. It had not tightened. It had not trapped. It waited. No, she said softly. I think it protected me. The ancient dragon's voice rose from beneath the terrace. Not protected, answered. The funeral pyre collapsed completely. Queen Evelyn's ashes spiraled upward, joining the dead bride's flames. Their faces circled the terrace one final time, not grieving now, but watching, waiting to see if the living would repeat the old shape of power or break it. Morwen fell to her knees for the first time, not in repentance, in calculation. If you complete this, she said to Kael, you will not be king as your fathers were. The dragons will answer her as much as you. The court will question every death, every marriage, every crowned queen. The noble houses will rebel. Kael's face was calm now. That frightened Morwen more than rage. Then they will rebel against the truth, he said. Morwen looked at Sera. And you? You think he will always be gentle because he speaks softly while the fire is watching? He is still a dragon king. One day he will need your power, and need becomes command very quickly. Sera did not answer at once, because the warning was not empty. That was Morwen's final poison. She wrapped fear around truth. Kings did need, thrones did take. Love could become another right if people dressed it in destiny and applause. Sera looked at Kael. He looked back without defense. No denial. No grand promise. No beautiful lie that he would never fail. Never fear. Never become what power had trained him to be. Instead, he released her hand. The thread between them dimmed, but did not break. The court gasped. Kael lowered his sword and stepped back from her, leaving space between them wide enough for choice to breathe. If the bond completes, he said, loud enough for every noble and dragon to hear, it will not be because the throne claims her. It will be because Sera Vale answers of her own will. If she refuses, no priest, noble, dragon, or king will touch her. The white fire beneath Sera's skin steadied. The second dragon inside her lowered its head. Sera felt the shape of the choice then. Not romance as surrender. Not power as revenge. A door. A dangerous one. Behind it stood grief, kingdom, fire. A man who had almost believed the lie but chose to stop when truth demanded it. Behind it also stood every dead bride who never had the chance to choose. She turned toward them. The dead brides lifted their flaming hands. Not pushing, offering witness. Sera inhaled. I answer, she said. The bond flame leaped from her hand to Kael's chest. His dragon shadow roared. The second dragon beneath Sera's skin rose fully, not out of her body, but through her shadow. White gold wings unfolded behind her, bright as dawn through smoke. Kael's dragon shadow lowered its massive head to hers, not conquering, not consuming, but recognizing an equal flame. The terrace split with light. The ancient dragon beneath the palace roared, free at last. Every false funeral brand on the walls of Dravenhold burned away at once. Black ash marks on hidden doors, old marriage records, priestess scrolls, and sealed burial stones turned white, then vanished. Across the terrace, the dead bride's flames rose into the sky, carrying their names with them. Morwen screamed as her moonstone staff shattered in her hands. The fragments turned to dust before they reached the ground. When the light faded, Sera stood beside Kael, her ash mark transformed into living white gold wings beneath her collarbone. The ember crown was gone. No crown replaced it. That was what made the court afraid. She did not need one. Kael kneelt. The entire terrace froze. Sera stared at him. He did not bow like a conquered king. He lowered himself as a man acknowledging what his throne had tried to bury. The death rites are broken, he said. The false brides are named. The bond is answered. And before this court, I swear no crown in Dravenhold will ever again be fed by a woman's silence. The dragons in the sky bowed their heads. Sera's throat tightened. Then Morwen laughed from the ground, broken but not defeated. "You freed the brides," she whispered, "but you forgot the first one." The ancient dragon beneath the palace stopped roaring. Every flame on the terrace went still. Sera looked toward the dead pyre. From the ashes beneath Queen Evelyn's crown, a black hand rose. The black hand rose from Queen Evelyn's ashes. It was not flesh. It was funeral smoke shaped like bone, dripping black fire from fingers too long to belong to any living woman. The court screamed and scattered from the pyre. Dragons shrieked above the terrace. Even Kael's dragon shadow recoiled, not in fear of death, but in recognition of something older than the rites Morwen had broken. Sera stood very still. The white gold wings beneath her skin burned cold. Morwen lifted her head from the stone, smiling through blood and ash. "The first bride," she whispered. "The one your precious true fire could never name." The black hand gripped the edge of the pyre. Then, a woman pulled herself from the ashes. She wore no crown. Her hair fell in burned ropes over a face made of smoke, grief, and forgotten rage. Around her throat was a collar of blackened wedding gold, fused into her skin. Her eyes were empty hollows filled with starless flame. Every dead bride's flame above the terrace dimmed. Kael rose slowly beside Sera. "Who is she?" The ancient dragon answered from beneath the palace, and its voice trembled for the first time. "The first woman the throne loved. The first woman the throne buried." The black bride turned her hollow eyes toward Sera. When she spoke, her voice sounded like every funeral bell in Dravenhold ringing underwater. "I was not false." Sera's breath caught. The dead brides had been witnesses, victims, buried true bonds and stolen flames. But this woman was different. Her fire did not ask to be heard. It asked to take everything with it. Morwen pushed herself upright. Before the priesthood, before the marriage rites, before even the crowned pyres, there was the first bride. A dragon king loved her so deeply he burned half the realm when she died. That is why the rites were created. That is why true fire had to be controlled. Sera looked at Kael. His face had gone hard, but not with denial, with understanding. The priesthood had built centuries of cruelty around one ancient disaster. One grief turned into law. One love used as proof that women had to be silenced before kings could be safe. The first bride stepped from the pyre. Black fire spread beneath her bare feet, eating the white gold flame where it touched. "You freed the others," she said to Sera. "Free me." The plea should have sounded human. It did not. Behind the words lived hunger. If Sera answered wrongly, the first bride would not simply be released. She would pour centuries of abandoned grief through every true bond in the kingdom and turn love itself into wildfire. Kael moved slightly in front of Sera. She touched his arm. "No," she whispered. "She is not yours to fight." The first bride's hollow gaze shifted to him. "Dragon King, would you burn for her?" Kael did not hesitate. Yes. Black flame surged. Sera's heart clenched. That was the trap. Not hatred. Devotion. The old story repeating itself. A king, loving fiercely enough to make the world fear the woman beside him. Sera stepped between them. "Do not ask him what he would burn," she said. "Ask me what I would save." The first bride tilted her head. For the first time, the black fire paused. Sera walked toward her. Kael's hand flexed at his side, every part of him fighting the need to pull her back. But he did not command. He did not stop her. He trusted her with the flame she had chosen. That trust steadied her. The dead bride's sparks circled weakly overhead. Queen Evelyn's ash drifted near the pyre. No longer a corpse. No longer a queen. Only a tired soul waiting for the final lock to open. Sera stopped before the first bride. "You were loved," Sera said. The black bride's face twisted. "You were buried," Sera continued. "Then they used your grief to bury every woman after you. That was not protection. That was cowardice wearing law." Morwen spat from the ground. Careful, girl. Sera did not look at her. The first bride lifted one smoking hand and touched Sera's collarbone. Pain opened through the wing-shaped mark. A vision consumed the terrace. The court saw the first dragon palace, not made of black stone, but red cliff and open sky. They saw a young dragon king kneeling beside a dying woman with fire in her hair. They saw him scream when her breath stopped. They saw his dragon rise in grief and burn cities that had come to celebrate her death. They saw priests, nobles, and surviving queens gather afterward to make a law. Never again would a king's true bond be allowed to rule his fire. Then the vision changed. It showed the truth Morwen had not known. The first bride had not wanted revenge. As she lay dying, she had whispered to her king, "Do not burn for me. Build something that does not need my body to become holy." But he had not heard her. Rif had been louder. The vision faded. The first bride trembled. For centuries, she had been remembered as the woman whose love destroyed kingdoms. But the truth was worse and kinder. She had tried to stop it. Sera took the first bride's blackened hand. "I hear you," she said. The black fire broke. Not outward, inward. The collar of wedding gold around the first bride's throat cracked and fell into ash. Her hollow eyes filled with white gold flame. The darkness burned away from her face, revealing not a monster, but a woman who had been trapped inside the story men made from her death. She looked past Sera to Kael. "Then do what he could not," she whispered. Kael bowed his head. "I will." "No," Sera said softly. Both of them looked at her. She turned to the court, to the priestesses, to Morwen, to the dragons circling above, to every dead bride watching from the fire. "We will." The word changed the flame. White gold light swept across the funeral terrace. Not from Kael alone, not from Sera alone, but from the space between them where the bond had been answered without command. The dead brides rose into it. Evelyn first, then the healer, the servant girl, the northern woman, and countless others whose names the rites had stolen. The first bride lifted both hands, and the old death fire transformed into living witness flame. Morwen screamed as every black ash mark she had ever drawn appeared across her own skin. One for each woman. One for each lie. Kael looked at her with cold judgment. "You will name them." Morwen collapsed. "There are too many." Sera's voice did not shake. "Then you will live long enough." The surviving priestesses knelt, not to Sera, but to the dead whose names filled the air. Nobles lowered their heads. Guards dropped funeral spears. Above the cliffs, dragons folded their wings and bowed toward the terrace where the first law had finally broken. The first bride's fire touched Sera's mark one last time. The wing beneath her collarbone softened, from painful white to warm gold. Not a brand. Not a curse. A vow. Then the first bride dissolved into dawn. The storm ended. Rain stopped over Dravenhold as if someone had lifted a veil from the sky. Sera stood before the extinguished pyre, ash in her hair, Kael beside her, no crown between them. The dead queen's dragonbone crown lay cracked at their feet. Kael looked down at it, then kicked it into the cold ashes. The court gasped. He did not care. "No more death crowns," he said. Then he turned to Sera, not touching her, not claiming her before the court that had nearly burned her alive. "The bond is yours to answer again tomorrow, and every day after." Sera looked at him. This was not a perfect ending. Too many women were still dead. Too many names had to be restored. Too many laws had to be torn apart and written again without blood beneath the ink. But the fire no longer called her curse. It called her witness, and when Kael's dragon lowered its shadow beside hers, it did not swallow her light. It guarded it. At dawn, the funeral terrace became a place of names instead of silence. The ashes of false brides were carried from the crypt. The death rites were broken. Morwen was taken below, not to be burned, but to testify until every buried woman stood in history again. Sera walked to the edge of the terrace as sunlight touched the black cliffs. Dragons circled below, free from the old rites at last. Kael stood a few steps behind her, close enough to protect, far enough to let her breathe. She touched the golden wings beneath her collarbone. For the first time, the mark felt like her own. Behind her, Kael bowed his head. Not to a queen. Not yet. To the woman the funeral fire had tried to reveal before the court could destroy her. And when Sera finally looked back at him, the last ember of the dead pyre bent toward her hands, gentle as a living heart.